Housing markets across North America are red hot, and it seems like everybody's making money in real estate. Should you buy or should you rent in 2021? Time to think like an investor. So in 2 short months from now, my lease on my apartment is coming up, and this always brings up the age-old conversation. Where do I go next? Should I rent? Should I buy? Should I put a down payment on a house and try to build equity, or should I continue burning money by renting? You know, these myths they talk about when it comes to renting versus buying. I feel like I'm always back in the scenario, and the reality is I am, because I'm always signing these 1-year leases and then having to reassess thereafter. But for me, I've always done both. I've always owned a house. I mean, always. I haven't owned a house since I was 1. But when I was 18, I bought my first rental property and I actually lived in it for a while. And then I've also had the experience of renting my own apartment and those sorts of things. And I've seen kind of what the lifestyle is like with both. And I think today I want to talk about renting versus buying and my opinions on, is it a complete waste of money to rent, or is it actually a great investment to rent? Should you be buying as prices continue to rise and rise, or should you wait it out for a little bit? Now, the reason this debate just rages on forever and ever is because there is so much joy in both of these things. For me personally, when it comes to buying a house, it was so much fun to have my own place that I could make my own and choose what renovations to do, and I could kind of sit there. I remember like sitting there like watering my grass, like the simplest of all things, on like a nice summer evening, and I was like, this is the best thing ever. It was like this primordial, like reptilian thing in my brain that's like, you have a little piece of property and you feel good about that. It was really funny. It's like this pride, it's this joy in owning property. But then when it comes to renting, that's just complete freedom. It's like the ultimate bachelor pad. You kind of come and go as you please. If things break, someone takes care of it. All I do is send 1 e-transfer every single month and my utilities and everything's taken care of. It completely frees up my mind from any issues. And I love that feeling of the freedom and flexibility and being able to live in different places all over town and experiencing different areas of the city. But when we're having these discussions, there's so many myths that are so pervasive. Like, you know, renting is just completely burning your money. It's the worst thing you could possibly do for your finances. And some people even say, you know, a home is the biggest investment you're ever gonna make in your entire life. Without a home, you won't accumulate any wealth. But the reality is both of those things are completely wrong. The reality is nobody really accounts for the fact that the all-in costs of renting in terms of both financially and your peace of mind and maintenance and all these different things is significantly lower. And not only that, you get to save the money you would have put down on a down payment. I mean, financially speaking, if you can take the $50,000 you were gonna put down on a house and actually invest that aggressively and allow it to compound for a very long period of time, the projections show over and over again. You can manipulate the math to make it look any way you want it, but it's awfully close. It's always close. Somebody who kept their down payment and invested it for their whole life versus somebody who put that into a house and paid that off and had the equity at the end, they end up at relatively the same spot. So financially speaking, you can manage it both ways, and I don't think it's evil to rent. And on the whole wasting money argument, no one really seems to understand amortization schedules. No one really understands that for like the first 5 years of homeownership, you're actually paying like 60% of every monthly payment to the bank in interest, and only 40% of your monthly payment is actually reducing your principal. So the reality is, for the first couple years, maybe even 5 years of owning a home, you're barely even accumulating any equity at all, and you've plunged this massive down payment into it that you're never going to get back. And to end my rant, I'm going to offend a whole bunch of you and say that if you end up in life with your home being your biggest investment you ever made, you have done something massively wrong, because it means you just really haven't leveraged the world of capital and investing correctly if your house is your biggest asset. Now, as I said before, it's like this debate just rages on forever and no one ever solves it. You know, your parents say you should buy, and then your friend who's a financial advisor says it's not that bad to rent. All of these sorts of things. It's kind of like this never ends. And one piece of advice I heard is that if the question rages on for forever, it means the question probably isn't being posed properly. That means it's probably not a specific enough question to come to a really good conclusion. So I would like to reformulate the question. Instead of saying, should we rent or should we buy, I'd like to talk about what is the worst possible thing you could do if you are renting or buying. What is the worst decision you could make that you want to avoid when you're going through this decision? Worst thing number 1 is that you cannot be a renter and not be investing your down payment or investing the difference. If you think that renting is a good idea, but you're not massively over investing on the side, then you're really not accumulating any equity whatsoever, and renting is indeed a pretty horrible idea. The case to be made for renting as a good financial decision is all about investing the difference and making sure that you're growing wealth on the side because you're not growing it with home equity. Now, worst possible thing you can do, number 2, is buy a house and then continually move over and over and over in short periods of time, or do the whole thing where you're gonna buy a starter home for like 3 years and then move out into something bigger. The reason that's a horrible idea is, like what I said before, the way an amortization works on a mortgage is that you're not really gaining any equity in the first 5 years anyways. So the real case to be made that a house or real estate is wealth producing is if you own it for a massive period of time, if you own it for 20 years or 30 years or something like that. In addition to that, every single time you move, there's going to be realtor fees, lawyer fees, land transfer taxes. You're gonna have to pay the fee for breaking your mortgage. Thousands and thousands of dollars that add up over time every single time you go through a real estate transaction. So I think the 2 worst things we can do, let's not even think about should I rent or should I buy. I wanna tell you 2 things that you absolutely should not do if you're planning to do them, because that's gonna save you a lot more hassle. What you shouldn't do is rent without investing the difference, and what you shouldn't do is buy a house and move very frequently. The happy medium I've ultimately found is that I think I'd like to rent the place that I live in and rent out the place that I own. That way, somebody else is paying my mortgage and making sure that I'm building equity and there's the appreciation and the value of the home. But when it comes time to fix things, I have a property manager that can kind of, for the most part, take care of that stuff. And when it comes to living in my personal space, I want to make sure that it's free of issues. I want to make sure that it's peace of mind. I don't have to worry about bills and notices and all these things. Then I can live in the place I rent where that's all taken care of. So that's kind of a nice balance for me and something that I'm probably going to continue to do for quite a long time. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's discussion on renting versus buying and some of my thoughts on the process and maybe posing the question a little bit differently. If you enjoyed this video whatsoever, make sure to hit that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on post notifications for more videos just like this one every single week. Until next time.